You wake up at like 5 a.m., you drink this meticulously blended green smoothie that honestly tastes vaguely like lawn clippings.
Oh, yeah, the classic hustle culture breakfast.
Right. And then you open your custom-bound journal and you write down 10 positive affirmations, something like, I am a vessel of unlimited potential. I attract wealth and joy.
Wow. Very inspiring.
Totally. So you do the breathing exercises, you take the cold plunge, you check literally every single box on the modern self-optimization checklist.
Right.
And yet as you sit in traffic on the way to work, you still feel this gnawing, hollow sense of misery.
Which is so common, right? It's like, why is that happening?
Exactly. Why? Well, because the mathematical formula we have all been sold for happiness is, frankly, fundamentally broken.
It's completely broken. We treat human fulfillment like it's an engineering problem.
Right. Like X amount of positive thinking plus Y amount of productivity hacks equals a perfect life.
Yeah, but when you step into the actual reality of human psychology, into the messy, contradictory, uncomfortable world of our actual emotions,
That algorithm just collapses completely.
it completely collapses because it's based on a flawed premise. We crave the algorithm, obviously. We desperately want success and happiness to be visible and measurable.
We want it categorized into a neat 10-step morning routine.
Exactly, because it provides the solution of control. But, the human mind isn't a spreadsheet.
No, it really isn't.
When you try to force complex emotional ecosystems into a neat little positive thinking framework, you don't actually eliminate your negative feelings.
You just bury them,
Right. You bury them where they mutate and honestly just grow stronger.
which is exactly what we're tearing down today. If you're listening to this deep dive, you are likely someone who loves to learn, you know.
Definitely a learner.
Yeah, you're constantly seeking to improve, and as a result, you are undoubtedly bombarded with this traditional positive thinking industrial complex every single day.
It's inescapable.
It really is. So today, we are using the brutally honest framework from Mark Manson's source material to figure out why trying to feel good all the time is, ironically, the exact reason you feel so bad.
Yeah, it's a massive paradox.
Our mission today is radically counterintuitive. We are going to explore how the secret to a good life isn't about caring more about everything.
Right. It's actually about caring less.
Yes, caring less about the trivial and fiercely prioritizing what actually matters. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even start?
Well, the philosophical anchor for this entire perspective actually comes from the mid-20th century philosopher Alan Watts.
Oh, I love Watts.
He's great. He introduced a concept called the backwards law. And what's fascinating here is that it's an absolute mind bender once you really internalize it.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the backwards law states that the desire for more positive experience is in itself a negative experience.
Okay.
And paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is in itself a positive experience.
Whoa, wait, let me make sure I'm getting this. Are you saying that the very act of wanting something reinforces the fact that I don't have it?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
So, like, the more I desperately want to be rich, the poorer and more unworthy I actually feel, regardless of how much money is sitting in my bank account.
Spot on. Just think about the psychology of desire. When you obsess over wanting to be happier, you are simultaneously reinforcing the neurological reality that you are not happy right now.
I see.
You are actively carving a neural pathway of lack. You don't stand in front of a mirror repeating affirmations that you are beautiful unless you feel on some fundamental subconscious level that you aren't.
Wow, that's heavy. A genuinely happy person doesn't have to stand in front of a mirror and say, I am happy, do they?
No, they just are. They're just living their lives.
Okay, that shifts the whole paradigm for me. And if you think about it, our consumer culture is essentially a giant machine designed to weaponize this backwards law against us, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. It thrives on it.
We are constantly bombarded with messaging that tells us to pursue the positive. Buy this newer car, get this anti-aging cream, travel to this exotic location.
Smile more, be more.
Exactly.
It is literally the economic engine of modern society. Consumerism relies entirely on you feeling inadequate.
Because if you felt completely satisfied with your life, the global economy would grind to a halt tomorrow.
It would. So the system intentionally breeds anxiety. It kind of has to, right?
Right.
It manufactures a constant state of dissatisfaction by showing you an endless highlight reel of superficial emotional highs that you are supposedly missing out on.
Which perfectly explains the Unlikely hero we need to talk about next.
Yes, the best example for this.
If we really want to understand the power of giving up the pursuit of this idealized, consumer-packaged version of success, we have to look at Charles Bukowski.
Such a wild story.
Right. For those who don't know, Bukowski was not a self-help guru. He was an alcoholic, a chronic gambler, a womanizer, a deadbeat, just generally a chaotic mess of a human being.
A total disaster on paper.
Yeah. And for decades, he desperately wanted to be a writer. But his work was universally rejected. I mean, editors were disgusted by it.
It was too raw, too ugly for them.
Exactly. So he worked as a letter filer at a post office, got paid essentially nothing, and spent whatever he did make on cheap booze and the racetrack.
He would literally pass out on the floor every single night.
Right, living in absolute squalor.
Yeah.
And 30 years go by like this.
30 years of failure.
Yeah. Then, when he's 50 years old, an editor at a small indie publishing house takes a weird liking to him and offers him a tiny deal.
Like a really small advance.
Yeah, barely anything. But Bukowski signs it, quits the post office, and writes his first novel, Post Office, in 3 weeks.
And in the dedication of that novel, he literally wrote, dedicated to nobody.
Yes, I love that detail. And he goes on to sell over 2 million copies of his books. He becomes a massive global sensation.
Which is crazy.
It is. Now, the natural instinct in our culture is to map the classic American dream narrative onto this story.
Oh, of course. We want to say, look at Bukowski. He never gave up. He always believed in himself.
He kept a positive attitude, and he finally achieved his dreams. But if you go to his actual tombstone in Los Angeles, his epitaph is literally 2 words.
Don't try.
Don't try.
Oh.
It completely shatters the Hollywood narrative.
It really does. Because Bukowski's success wasn't a result of him believing he was a winner.
Right.
It was precisely because he accepted on a cellular level that he was a loser. And he just wrote honestly about that reality.
He didn't try to be a shining literary light.
No, he didn't pretend to be sophisticated. He was unflinchingly, brutally honest about his own failings, his own depravity, and his own misery.
His comfort with himself as a failure was his actual genius.
Exactly. Even after he was famous, he didn't change. He'd show up to poetry readings completely hammered and actively insult the audience.
He never tried to be anything other than what he was.
Which highlights a really crucial distinction here. Self-improvement and success often happen together, but they are absolutely not the same thing.
Oh, that's a great point.
You can become highly successful while completely degrading your own psychological well-being. Bukowski succeeded by surrendering the pursuit of a positive, idealized version of himself.
He just accepted his deeply flawed reality.
Right.
And this brings us to a psychological trap that I guarantee every single person listening to this has fallen into. The source material calls it the feedback loop from hell.
Oh, this is so real.
It's what happens when our biological hardware clashes with this cultural demand for constant positivity. Imagine you get anxious about confronting someone, maybe your boss or your partner.
Sure.
You feel the anxiety in your chest. But because culture has told you that you should always be confident and positive, you start wondering why you're so anxious.
You start judging yourself.
Exactly. You judge yourself for the anxiety. Now you're anxious about being anxious.
Or you feel guilty for a mistake you made, and then you remember that you're supposed to be this self-forgiving, enlightened person.
Right.
So you start feeling guilty about the fact that you're feeling guilty.
Yes. It's an infinite loop of self-loathing. I'm angry that I'm angry. I'm sad that I'm sad.
This is the curse of human metacognition.
Metacognition.
Yeah, we are the only animals with the neurological luxury of having thoughts about our own thoughts.
Yeah.
The prefrontal cortex allows us to observe our own mental states. But when you combine that biological feature with a society that insists any negative emotion is a failure, you get a catastrophic misfire.
A total short circuit.
Exactly. You feel like garbage for 5 minutes, so you instinctively open social media to numb it, and you see 300 hyper-curated images of people having amazing, perfect lives.
Which makes it so much worse.
Right. Now, not only do you feel bad, but you feel like there is something inherently broken within you because you aren't experiencing that same euphoria.
You literally feel bad about feeling bad.
The feedback loop from hell is entirely generated by our refusal to accept that negative emotions are normal.
Okay, I have to push back hard here.
Go for it.
Because if I just accept my negative emotions, isn't that just a recipe for absolute apathy?
How do you mean?
Well, if I'm feeling severely anxious or depressed, isn't it human nature to want to improve that state? Let's use an analogy.
Okay.
If I'm sitting in my house and the fire alarm goes off because the kitchen is on fire, You wouldn't tell me to just accept the alarm and sit on the couch while the house burns down, right?
Right. Obviously not.
If I'm anxious, that's an alarm. I should try to fix it, shouldn't I?
It's a brilliant analogy, but we really need to look at how you're responding to the alarm.
Okay.
The goal isn't to ignore the fire alarm and let the house burn down. The goal is to stop getting intensely, violently angry at yourself for hearing the fire alarm in the first place.
Wait, explain that. I'm not sure I follow.
So when you experience anxiety, that is the fire alarm. It's a biological signal that something requires your attention.
Sure.
But when you demand that you shouldn't be anxious, when you beat yourself up for having the emotion, you are essentially standing in the burning kitchen, screaming at the plastic alarm on the ceiling for making a loud noise, rather than putting out the fire. You're adding a second, purely psychological layer of suffering on top of the original problem.
So I'm just wasting energy yelling at the alarm instead of grabbing a fire extinguisher.
Exactly. Short-circuiting the feedback loop from hell means accepting that the fire alarm is ringing, and that's okay.
Sometimes you feel anxious. Sometimes things just suck.
And the moment you stop hating yourself for feeling the negative emotion, the loop breaks. You can then rationally address the actual problem, putting out the fire, without the crippling weight of self-judgment.
You accept the negative experience, which, according to the backwards law, frees you up. It becomes a positive experience.
Precisely.
So the acceptance isn't about resigning to the fire. It's about not fighting the reality that there is a fire.
Exactly.
If we stop obsessing over feeling good all the time, and we accept that sometimes life is just going to feel bad,
Yeah.
what should we care about? What is the actual nature of happiness if it's not a constant stream of positive emotions?
To really dissect that, we need to look at a story that dates back roughly 2,500 years to the Himalayan foothills.
The story of the prince and the Buddha. This perfectly illustrates exactly what we're talking about.
It really does.
So, a king has a son, and there's a prophecy that this son will either be a great ruler or a great spiritual leader.
And the king definitely wants a ruler.
Right. So the king decides to make this child's life so completely perfect that he never has a reason to seek spiritual depth. He builds incredibly high walls around the palace.
He spoils the prince with endless luxury, food, gifts, concubines, servants.
Prince is entirely sheltered from any concept of human suffering. Yeah, every whim is instantly gratified. But as a young man, despite having every single physical and superficial need met, he feels completely hollow.
It's just not enough.
No. So he eventually sneaks out of the palace walls, and for the first time in his life, he sees the reality of the world. He sees disease, old age, and death.
Which triggers a massive existential crisis.
Huge crisis. He realizes that a life of endless pleasure, a life without any friction or struggle, is fundamentally meaningless. The algorithm of pure positivity failed him.
So, human nature being what it is, he assumes the answer must be the exact extreme opposite.
Right. He runs away, gives up his royalty, his clothes, everything, and lives in the dirt as an ascetic.
He starves himself, tortures himself, exposes himself to the elements.
Supposedly eating like a single nut a day. He does this for years alongside other ascetics, hoping that extreme self-inflicted suffering will purify him and bring ultimate insight.
And then nothing happens.
Nothing. He's just starving and miserable. He realizes that suffering purely for the sake of suffering also totally sucks and is completely meaningless.
It's just a different kind of trap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he cleans himself up, goes and sits under a large Bodhi tree near a river, and decides he is not going to move until he figures out the mechanism of human fulfillment.
And after sitting there, he comes to a profound realization that forms the basis of his philosophy as the Buddha.
Which is?
Life itself is intrinsically linked to suffering. It is inescapable. The rich suffer because of the complications of their riches. The poor suffer because of their poverty. People with families suffer because of the deep anxieties of protecting their families.
And people without them suffer the deep sting of loneliness.
Right. The Buddha realizes that pain and loss are inevitable components of the human operating system, and the path to peace is letting go of the illusion that we can resist or avoid them.
Which brings us to arguably my absolute favorite concept in this entire deep dive.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
If the Buddha proved that suffering is inevitable, that leaves us with a terrifying reality. Our brains are actually wired to need friction.
We crave it.
We do. And to illustrate this biological need, the source text introduces a hypothetical superhero. Forget Superman, forget Batman. I want to introduce you to Disappointment Panda.
Disappointment Panda. He's exactly what society needs, yet entirely what it rejects.
Disappointment Panda wears a cheesy, poorly fitted eye mask and a tight shirt with a giant T on his big panda belly that stands for truth. His superpower isn't flying or laser vision. His superpower is going door to door like a vacuum salesperson, ringing doorbells and telling people the harsh, uncomfortable truths about themselves that they desperately need to hear but refuse to accept.
You open the door, and there's Disappointment Panda saying, sure, making a lot of money makes you feel important, but it won't make your kids actually love you. Have a nice day.
Or, like, your relationship isn't failing because of your partner. It's failing because you have severe control issues. See ya.
It's hilarious, but it gets to a profound neurological truth. Disappointment Panda exists to deliver the core factual takeaway of our biological existence.
That pain is a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It is nature's preferred agent for inspiring change and adaptation.
Think about it physically. Stubbing your toe is a horrific, blinding physical pain.
The worst.
But evolutionary biology designed that pain specifically so you learn about your physical limits. If you didn't feel pain, you'd walk straight into tables, break your bones, and bleed to death without realizing it.
And emotional pain operates on the exact same neurological circuitry.
Literally the exact same circuitry.
Literally. The anterior cingulate cortex in the brain processes both the physical pain of a stubbed toe and the social pain of rejection.
That is wild.
They are functionally identical to your brain. Emotional pain teaches you about your psychological limits. The pain of rejection teaches you how to calibrate your social behaviors.
And the pain of failure teaches you to refine your strategies.
Exactly. If we never felt emotional pain, we would never evolve, adapt, or deepen our understanding of ourselves or others.
This is a monumental shift for anyone listening.
Yeah.
We have to completely reevaluate our relationship with discomfort. And this is exactly why we have to deeply contrast solving real problems versus seeking superficial emotional highs.
The source materials is adamant about this.
Right. When people avoid their problems because the pain is too uncomfortable or when they feel powerless to solve them, their brain still craves relief. So what do?
They seek out a quick dopamine hit to numb the pain.
And we really need to contrast solving real problems versus seeking superficial emotional highs because one builds a life and the other destroys it.
That's the perfect way to phrase it. Superficial highs are easy. It could be substance abuse, obviously, but it's often much more insidious.
Like what?
Well, it could be the moral righteousness of blaming your political opponents on Twitter. It could be the adrenaline thrill of a risky affair. It could be obsessively checking your phone for likes to get that microdose of superficial validation.
Very true.
These highs are completely shallow. They spike your dopamine temporarily, but they don't produce serotonin or oxytocin, the neurochemicals of long-term fulfillment.
They don't generate happiness. They just generate addiction.
Right. You need more and more of the high just to feel a baseline level of okay.
So if avoiding pain leads to addiction and pursuing pleasure leads to emptiness like the prince, what is the actual mechanism of happiness? How do we find it?
Happiness isn't the absence of problems. That is the greatest lie we've ever been sold.
The ultimate lie.
As Disappointment Panda would tell you, problems never ever go away. They just improve.
Warren Buffett has money problems. A homeless person on the street has money problems.
Exactly. Warren Buffett just has exponentially better money problems.
True happiness, on a neurobiological level, comes from the act of solving problems. The secret sauce of human fulfillment is in the solving, not the absence of the puzzle.
I absolutely love that. You don't just magically find happiness waiting for you like a prize at the end of a maze when you finally buy the right house or get the promotion.
Happiness is an active, ongoing activity. But this leads to a really confronting realization. If problems are biologically inevitable, we are asking the wrong questions about our futures.
We really are.
If you ask someone, what do you want out of life? Almost everyone answers that the exact same way. I want to be happy, I want a great job, I want a house, I want a loving family.
Everyone wants the reward.
My question is useless. The much more interesting, revealing question is, what pain do you want in your life?
Yes. What are you willing to suffer for? Because that dictates your trajectory. Are you in love with the victory, or are you actually in love with the fight?
The text gives a brilliant example of this that I think resonates with almost everyone.
The rock star example.
Yes. A lot of people want to be rock stars. They envision the crowds, the screaming fans, the glory, the backstage parties.
Oh, I had that exact fantasy when I was a teenager. I was convinced I was going to be a musician. I bought the guitar. I envisioned myself on stage, the lights, the applause. I wanted the result.
Right. You wanted the peak experience,
Hmm.
but did you want the struggle?
Not at all. I absolutely hated the process. I didn't want the pain of calluses on my fingers.
You didn't want to haul heavy gear to empty dive bars on a Tuesday night.
Exactly. Play for 3 people who are ignoring me, deal with broken strings, blown amps, and constant soul-crushing rejection from record labels.
You didn't want the pain of climbing the mountain. You just wanted to be teleported to the summit via helicopter.
And because of that, I didn't even try hard enough to fail. I just never did it.
And that is the ultimate litmus test. Who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for.
The people who genuinely enjoy the stresses of the starving artist lifestyle, the uncertainty, the practicing, the terrible gigs, those are the ones who actually make it.
Just like the people who genuinely enjoy the pain of 60-hour work weeks, complex spreadsheets, and navigating corporate politics are the ones who make it to the corner office.
Our struggles determine our successes. You cannot divorce the destination from the agonizing journey it takes to get there.
This makes perfect sense. But it brings up a massive issue, right?
It's that.
Well, if our struggles determine our success, and happiness comes from solving problems, how do we make sure we are struggling for the right things? I mean, plenty of people struggle their entire lives and remain completely miserable.
That's true.
How do we ensure our problems are actually worth solving?
To figure that out, we have to talk about how we measure our reality. We need to examine what the author calls the tyranny of exceptionalism.
And the best way to understand this is through a guy named Jimmy.
Oh, Jimmy.
Jimmy is a character from the source material, and we all know a Jimmy. Jimmy is a total deadbeat. He lives off his relatives, he's stoned most of the time, his various business ventures never go anywhere.
But he talks big game.
Oh, massive game. He routinely spends money he doesn't have at fine restaurants trying to look like a wealthy entrepreneur. But here's the psychological catch-in. Jimmy felt incredibly, undeniably great about himself.
He had a delusional level of self-confidence.
If he pitched you a terrible idea and you rejected it, he didn't reflect on his idea. He just assumed you were a jealous hater who couldn't comprehend his genius.
Jimmy is fascinating because he is the ultimate tragic byproduct of the 1970s self-esteem movement.
Right.
Decades ago, psychologists started teaching the public that merely feeling good about yourself was the ultimate goal of mental health. This was the birth of the participation trophy era.
We told entire generations that they were uniquely special, destined for greatness, simply by virtue of existing.
But this completely detached self-esteem from actual achievement. True self-worth isn't measured by how positively you feel about your perceived successes.
What is it measured by then?
True self-worth is measured by how you handle your negatives, your failures, and your flaws.
Because Jimmy was completely entitled. He felt he inherently deserved good things without putting in any of the requisite struggle to earn them.
And when reality inevitably hit him, he didn't adapt. He just piled on more delusion to protect his fragile ego.
And what's terrifying is that modern media makes this delusion so much worse.
Oh, infinitely worse. We have to look at the baseline expectations being set by algorithms.
Before the internet, you compared yourself to the people in your town. If you're the best guitar player in your high school, you felt great.
Now you open YouTube or TikTok, and you are instantly flooded all day, every day, with the 99.999th percentile of human experience.
You see the absolute best athletes, the richest teenagers, the most profound artists, the funniest comedians.
You are only seeing the extreme ends of the bell curve, because that's what drives engagement.
Right. And the psychological effect of this is completely devastating. It tricks our brains into believing that being exceptional is the new normal.
We look at these highly curated, heavily edited anomalies and think, this is what baseline life looks like.
And since the vast majority of human existence is, by mathematical definition, average and mundane, we constantly feel like we are failing.
We feel profoundly inadequate, so we overcompensate.
We either become entitled, like Jimmy, insisting we are special despite our lack of effort, or we fall into despair and addiction. We have to internalize a hard statistical truth. It is impossible for everyone to be extraordinary.
Being average at most things is not a failure. It is the default state of existence.
So if we accept that we are mostly average, and we know that happiness comes from solving problems,
Yeah.
how do we look inward?
How do we figure out what we actually value?
Yeah, so we can pick the right problems. The text introduces a framework called the self-awareness onion.
I love this concept. Think of it like trying to debug a piece of broken software. It has 3 layers, and peeling them back usually involves a lot of discomfort.
The first layer, the surface layer, is a simple understanding of your emotions. It's just identifying the error message on the screen.
I feel sad, or I feel angry, or I feel jealous.
And frankly, a lot of people struggle even with this basic emotional literacy.
Absolutely. This is the classic scenario where someone is aggressively slamming kitchen cupboards. And when you ask what's wrong, they grit their teeth and scream, "Nothing is wrong, I'm fine."
They can't even acknowledge the surface emotion.
But let's say you master that. The second layer of the onion is asking why we feel those emotions.
Why am I angry? Is it because I failed at a goal? Is it because someone disrespected me?
This is like looking at the specific line of broken code. It helps us understand the immediate root cause of the feeling.
But the third layer, the deepest one, is where the real work happens. This is examining our personal values and metrics.
By what standard am I judging myself and everyone around me?
Why do I consider this specific thing a success or a failure? This is realizing that the entire operating system of your life might be built for the wrong hardware.
And to truly understand how metrics dictate our happiness, we have to look at two incredibly contrasting stories of famous rock musicians.
The contrast here is staggering, and it all comes down to the metrics they chose.
The first is Dave Mustaine.
Ah, yes. In 1983, Mustaine was the lead guitarist for a band that was just gaining traction. But a couple of days before they were supposed to record their first album, his bandmates decided his drug use and behavior were too erratic.
They kicked him out.
Yeah.
No warning, no discussion.
They just woke him up, handed him a bus ticket home, and that was it. Mustaine was devastated, but mostly he was furious.
Understandably.
On that 4-day bus ride home, he vowed to start a new band. He decided he was going to become so massively successful that his old bandmates would bathe in their tears of regret for kicking him out.
So he works like a demon, he forms a new band, and they end up selling 25 million records.
They tour the world, make millions of dollars, and become heavy metal legends. That band was Megadeth.
It is an incredible achievement. By almost any objective societal metric, money, fame, artistic influence, Dave Mustaine was wildly, unimaginably successful.
But the band he was kicked out of was Metallica.
Right.
And Metallica went on to sell over 180 million albums and become one of the biggest musical acts in human history.
And in an intimate 2003 documentary interview, Mustaine, sitting there with millions of dollars in the bank and legions of fans, tearfully admitted that he still considered himself a complete failure.
Why? Because his core value, his underlying metric for success, was be more successful than Metallica.
His metric was relative, not absolute. It relied entirely on the performance of someone else, which he could not control.
Now, contrast that tragic sense of failure with the story of Pete Best.
This one is so telling.
In 1962, Pete Best was the drummer for a scrappy band from Liverpool with funny haircuts, the Beatles.
They had been playing grimy clubs in Hamburg, paying their dues.
Just as they finally secured their first real record contract, the other members quietly had their manager fire Pete and brought in Ringo Starr to replace him.
Pete Best had to watch from the sidelines as the band he poured his sweat into became the most famous, iconic faces on the planet.
The level of regret and despair must have been agonizing. He fell into deep depression and even attempted suicide in 1968.
But here's where the story diverges from Mustaine's. Later in life, Pete Best gave an interview where he made a stunning claim.
He said he was actually happier than he would have been if he had stayed with the Beatles.
Why? Because getting kicked out led him to meet his wife, which led to his children, which led to his grandchildren.
He completely redefined his values. He stopped valuing global fame and adoration, and he started valuing a simple life, domestic tranquility, and a loving family.
He still played drums, but his metric for a good life completely changed.
Mustaine had millions of dollars in global fame, but was miserable because he was operating on a shitty value. Best lost out on being a Beatle, arguably the biggest missed opportunity in music history, but became a genuinely happy, fulfilled old man because he consciously chose a good value.
This is such a powerful distinction.
It really is. And this brings us to a crucial, actionable exercise for you, the listener. I want you, listening right now, to mentally list 3 personal priorities in your life.
Just list 3 personal priorities right now.
What are the 3 things you value most? Maybe it's your career, your family, your health, your social status, your financial independence. Just list 3 personal priorities.
And as you list those 3 personal priorities, we need to put them through a psychological stress test.
Are they genuinely good values, or are they shitty values in disguise?
The source material defines shitty values as things like maximizing pleasure, achieving material success for its own sake, always needing to be right, or, as we discussed earlier, staying positive all the time.
So if I list making $1 million as one of my 3 personal priorities. Why is that a shitty value? It sounds like a great goal.
It's a poor ideal because it is ultimately out of your direct control and can easily become socially destructive.
Okay, I see.
If your priority is, I want to be popular or I want to be richer than my neighbors, that relies entirely on external validation and the behavior of external markets or other people.
You cannot control what other people think of you. You cannot perfectly control the stock market.
When your values are tied to external forces, you are essentially handing the keys to your emotional well-being to strangers. It breeds anxiety and often leads to toxic manipulative behavior to try and control those external factors.
So when you list 3 personal priorities, you have to choose values that make problems worth solving.
Exactly.
But how do we know for sure? How do we know if our chosen priority is actually a toxic value masked as a good one?
You examine the metric by which you measure it. Good values share 3 characteristics. They are reality-based, they are socially constructive, and most importantly, they are immediate and controllable. They are internal.
Let's look at honesty. Honesty is a fantastic value. Why? Because you have 100% complete control over whether you choose to be honest in this exact present moment.
Curiosity, humility, vulnerability, standing up for others, creativity, these are internal metrics.
If your priority relies on external validation, it's toxic. If it's internal and controllable, it makes the problems you inevitably face actually worth solving.
Yes, you must choose values that make problems worth solving.
Let's connect that back to the idea of problems. If my value is be the most popular person at the party, the problem I have to solve is how do I manipulate everyone here into liking me?
That's a terrible, exhausting problem that leaves you feeling empty.
But if my value is be genuinely curious about others, the problem I have to solve is what questions can I ask this person to understand them better?
That's a problem worth solving. It builds connection.
When you choose better values, you get better problems. And when you get better problems, you get a fundamentally better life. Choose values that make problems worth solving.
And this transition into better values brings us to one of the most powerful and, frankly, the most uncomfortable concepts in this entire deep dive.
Oh, this is the part where people are going to get defensive.
If we want to take control of our values, we have to embrace radical responsibility.
We have to talk about the massive difference between responsibility and fault. This is a huge mental roadblock. We tend to conflate the two.
We think if something is my responsibility, it must mean it was my fault.
But they're completely different concepts. Fault is backward-looking, responsibility is forward-looking.
The text gives an incredibly stark analogy for this. Imagine you wake up one morning, open your front door, and someone has left a newborn baby in a basket on your doorstep.
It is absolutely 100% not your fault that the baby is there. You didn't put it there. You didn't ask for it.
But it is entirely, undeniably your responsibility to decide what to do next.
You have to call the police, or take it to a hospital, or feed it. You cannot just ignore it and say, not my fault, not my problem.
Fault is past tense. It results from choices already made by you or someone else. Responsibility is present tense. It results from the choices you are currently making in response to the situation.
We navigate experiences that aren't our fault all the time. Think of a judge in a courtroom. The judge did not commit the crime. It is not their fault the crime happened.
But it is absolutely their responsibility to interpret the law and hand down the sentence.
You might get robbed on the street or get laid off because of macroeconomic trends. Those things are entirely not your fault.
But you are completely responsible for how you handle the psychological, emotional, and legal fallout of those events. You are responsible for your reaction.
The source gives 2 historical examples that illustrate this perfectly. The first is William James in the late 19th century.
William James is a great example.
He was born into a wealthy family, but he suffered from horrific health problems. He experienced temporary blindness, deafness, and back spasms so severe he literally couldn't sit up.
He dropped out of Harvard Medical School because he was too sick.
Seeking a cure, he went on an expedition to the Amazon rainforest, where he promptly caught smallpox, almost died, and came back home a total failure nearing his 30th birthday.
He was deeply depressed and actively suicidal.
But one night, while reading philosophy, he decided to conduct a radical 1-year experiment. For exactly 1 year, he would choose to believe that he was 100% responsible for everything that occurred in his life, no matter what the external circumstances were.
He would stop blaming his body, his luck, or his family.
He would do everything within his power to change his circumstances, acting as if he had total control.
And the result of that experiment William James went on to become the undisputed father of American psychology.
He became a legendary philosopher and educator at Harvard. He credited that single, profound shift in perspective, taking absolute responsibility for his life, despite his objectively awful, unfair circumstances, as his spiritual and intellectual rebirth.
The second example takes this even further into the extreme. Malala Yousafzai.
Oh, wow.
In 2012, a member of the Taliban boarded her school bus in Pakistan, asked for her by name, and shot her in the head at point-blank range simply because she was advocating for the right of girls to receive an education.
She survived, miraculously. Now, she did not choose to be shot. It was entirely, unequivocally not her fault. It was an act of horrific injustice.
But she took total responsibility for her reaction. She didn't say, "I have been victimized, I have no choice, I must hide in fear."
She chose to use that horrific event as a platform. She kept speaking out, wrote a book, and ultimately became the youngest ever recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize.
And this raises a deeply uncomfortable question for all of us. When the distinction between fault and responsibility is so clear, why do we resist taking responsibility?
Why do we love what the author brilliantly terms victimhood chic?
Because blaming others provides a massive superficial emotional high. It feels incredibly good to be morally righteous, to point the finger and say, "You did this to me, you need to fix it."
We see this everywhere, especially online. People get addicted to the dopamine hit of feeling offended and victimized because it gives them a temporary rush of superiority and absolves them of the hard work of action.
But while blaming others might feel good in the short term, it is a toxic value. It robs us of all our agency.
Nobody else is ever responsible for your situation but you, because you and only you always get to choose how you perceive things, how you react, and what metrics you use to measure the experience.
Okay, intellectually, I think most people completely agree with that. But practically, taking that kind of responsibility requires a massive shift in how we view ourselves, and changing our identity is terrifying.
Which brings us to a psychological principle the author calls Manson's law of avoidance.
This law states the more something threatens your current identity, the more you will avoid doing it.
It's a self-preservation mechanism in the brain. We desperately need to know who we are to feel safe in the world.
Right. So if you have built your entire identity around being the practical, responsible insurance adjuster, you will subconsciously avoid writing that screenplay you've dreamed about for 10 years.
Why? Because actually trying it and either failing miserably or succeeding wildly would completely shatter the identity you've constructed.
If you view yourself as the independent, fun party guy, you will avoid settling down into a committed relationship, even if you are secretly miserable and lonely, because commitment threatens your core belief about who you are.
We would rather be comfortably miserable in our current identity than face the terrifying existential uncertainty of changing who we believe we are.
We protect our egos at the cost of our happiness, so how do we overcome this paralysis?
How do we actually take responsibility and change when our neurological hardware is wired to avoid it at all costs?
We have to completely flip our understanding of motivation.
Yes, the do something principle. This is a game changer.
Usually we think the chain of events goes like this. First, we experience some kind of emotional inspiration. That inspiration leads to motivation. And then finally, that motivation leads to action.
So what do? We sit around on the couch waiting for a burning bush or a great motivational speech or a sudden burst of energy to inspire us so we can finally get motivated to go to the gym or write the book or have the hard conversation.
We treat motivation like it's a weather event that just strikes us randomly.
But the source material argues that motivation is actually an endless, continuous loop. Action leads to inspiration, which leads to motivation, which leads to more action.
If you lack the motivation to do something, the worst thing you can do is wait. The solution is to just do something, anything.
The simple, physical act of working on a problem will eventually cause the right ideas and the requisite energy to show up.
If you need to build an entire website for your new business and you are completely paralyzed by the scope of it, you don't wait for inspiration. You just say, "I'm only going to design the header today." That's it.
You take a tiny, almost laughable action. That small action breaks the inertia. It generates a little bit of momentum, a tiny hit of inspiration, which then motivates you to do the next part and the next.
If you don't know what your life's purpose is, you don't sit in a room meditating on it endlessly. You just do something. Volunteer, take a class, build a birdhouse, anything.
The action itself becomes the metric for success, and even a failure pushes you forward because it provides data.
Action creates traction. And a massive part of taking action and taking radical responsibility for your own life is learning where your responsibility ends.
If you are going to focus on your chosen values, you have to ruthlessly eliminate what doesn't serve them. We need to talk about boundaries and rejection.
Absolutely. We are transitioning now into the absolute necessity of boundaries, and we need to describe how to refuse distractions in a world that is engineered to steal your attention.
The author shares a personal story about how he lived what many would consider the ultimate dream. He was a digital nomad. He sold all his possessions, made money online, and traveled to 55 different countries over 5 years.
He had absolute freedom. He could go anywhere, do anything, be with anyone.
But eventually, a creeping sense of emptiness set in. He realized that absolute freedom, without any commitment or roots, is completely meaningless.
You just bounce endlessly from one superficial high to the next, never building anything of substance.
It's the paradox of absolute freedom. To truly appreciate something, to truly extract meaning from an experience, you must confine yourself to it.
You cannot achieve decades of deep investment in a relationship, a craft, or a career without actively rejecting the alternatives.
The very act of choosing a value for yourself requires rejecting alternative values. If you value everything, you value nothing.
This concept was really hammered home for him on a trip to St. Petersburg, Russia. He talks about the Russian honesty example, which is fascinating sociologically.
In Russian culture, at least traditionally, there are no fake niceties. There are no polite, empty smiles to strangers.
If they think what you just said is stupid, they will look you in the eye and tell you it's stupid. If they genuinely like you, they will tell you they like you.
At first, his Western-coddled mind was deeply offended and shocked by this bluntness.
It feels aggressive to us, but he began to appreciate it as a pure, unadulterated expression of trust.
Think about it. Western consumer culture prioritizes superficial likability over genuine trust. We are trained to smile, to tell polite white lies, to pretend to be friends with people we secretly despise because our economic system rewards salesmanship, networking, and keeping things smooth.
But under oppressive systems like Soviet communism, you couldn't trust the system, so the most valuable currency in the world was personal trust.
And to build real trust, you have to be radically honest. You have to be willing to disagree.
And without conflict, there is absolutely no trust. You can never truly trust a yes man because you never know where they actually stand.
This ties directly into how we view boundaries and romantic relationships. The source gives this hilarious but incredibly accurate breakdown of Romeo and Juliet.
Culturally, we view Romeo and Juliet as the pinnacle of romantic love.
But when you look at it, it's actually a completely toxic relationship built entirely on a superficial high. They knew each other for a grand total of a few days. They killed themselves because they couldn't stand the emotional volatility, and it resulted in total disaster for everyone around them.
It wasn't love, it was the emotional equivalent of a cocaine binge.
It's a trauma bond fueled by dopamine. Healthy love versus unhealthy love ultimately comes down to boundaries.
In a toxic relationship, you have poor boundaries, which usually results in a dynamic pairing of a victim with a saver.
The victim refuses to take responsibility for their own problems and expects their partner to fix their emotions.
The saver thrives on taking on too much responsibility for the partner's problems because fixing the other person makes the saver feel worthy, important, and needed.
They are using each other to achieve superficial emotional highs. Contrast solving real problems versus seeking superficial emotional highs in a relationship, and you see this everywhere.
I can't go out with my friends tonight because my girlfriend will get jealous and sad. That is taking responsibility for someone else's unmanaged emotions.
A healthy relationship requires crystal clear boundaries. You take responsibility only for your own problems and your own values, and you expect your partner to do the same.
You support your partner, you empathize with them, but you absolutely do not try to fix their internal problems for them just to make yourself feel like a savior.
And maintaining those boundaries requires the ability to reject and be rejected. Modern culture teaches us to say yes to everything, to keep our options open, to avoid burning bridges.
But avoiding rejection just leaves us directionless and spread incredibly thin.
Which brings us to the next practical step. You need to practice saying no to unimportant requests today, not tomorrow, not next week, today.
We need to describe how to refuse distractions, because it's not just about putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, although that's a good start.
Describing how to refuse distractions is fundamentally about rejecting alternative values.
Think back to the exercise we did a few minutes ago. I asked you to list 3 personal priorities. Look at that list in your mind.
If you actively choose to value your marriage as a top priority, you must ruthlessly reject distractions flirtations, and alternatives that threaten that value.
If you value your career trajectory, you must reject frivolous time wasters or side projects that dilute your focus.
To value X, you must unequivocally reject non-X. Refusing distractions means looking at every single request, every opportunity, and every habit and asking a simple question: does this align with my three personal priorities?
If the answer is no, you must practice saying no to it. Rejecting what doesn't align with your core internal values is the ultimate life hack.
Exactly. Practice saying no to unimportant requests today. Choose values that make problems worth solving. List three personal priorities, stress test them, and then vigorously defend them.
Describe how to refuse distractions, not as a productivity trick, but as an act of self-preservation.
I know I'm repeating these phrases, but that repetition is entirely intentional. These aren't just ideas. They are the daily, compounding habits that shift the entire trajectory of your life.
But we have to zoom out for a second. Why does all this boundary setting and value choosing matter in the grand scheme of things?
How do we connect these daily habits to long-term personal satisfaction?
To understand that connection, we have to look at the paradox of choice.
Psychologists have found that when we have too many options, too many career paths, too many potential partners on dating apps, too many shows to watch, we actually become miserable.
We suffer from decision fatigue, and we are constantly haunted by the fear that we made the wrong choice, the fear of missing out.
Committing to a few key things, one geographic location, one life partner, one core career focus, actually provides a much deeper, more profoundly satisfying sense of freedom.
Breadth of experience is fun when you're young and exploring, but depth of experience is where the actual gold is buried.
And to truly understand why depth matters, why we shouldn't just skim the surface of life chasing highs, we have to look at the ultimate perspective. We have to look at death.
The author shares a deeply personal, incredibly tragic story in the book about his friend, Josh.
When they were 19 years old, they were at a party by a lake. It was dark, and there was a cliff overlooking the water. Josh decided he was going to jump into the dark water.
The author, not wanting to jump, told Josh he'd see him later down by the shore.
Josh looked at him and said, ironically, "Seek the truth for yourself, and I will meet you there." He jumped, and he drowned.
He was a terrible swimmer, his legs likely cramped in the cold water, and no one could see him struggling in the pitch black.
It's a devastating, traumatic event for a young person to witness, and it predictably thrust the author into a deep, agonizing depression.
He spent months staring into the abyss of existential meaninglessness. If a 19-year-old kid can just vanish in an instant, what is the point of anything?
But one day, while sitting on his mother's couch, paralyzed by this grief, he had a radical realization.
He realized that if there is truly no reason to do anything, if we are all going to die anyway, then there is also absolutely no reason not to do anything.
In the face of the absolute inevitability of death, there's no logical reason to give in to fear, embarrassment, social anxiety, or shame.
Those things are temporary illusions. By actively avoiding what was uncomfortable, he realized he had been avoiding being alive at all.
Josh's tragic death became the catalyst for him to start truly living, to go back to school, to start working out, to take radical responsibility for his time.
This realization perfectly mirrors the work of cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker.
Becker wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning book called The Denial of Death, which is a foundational text in psychology.
Becker argued that humans are entirely unique in the animal kingdom because we are the only creatures capable of conceptualizing our own existence and, crucially, our own mortality.
We possess the cognitive ability to know definitively that we are going to die. And according to Becker, this knowledge causes death terror.
A deep, subconscious, existential anxiety that hums in the background of everything we do.
So if we all have this subconscious death terror, how do we cope with it?
Yeah.
Becker says we cope by building what he calls immortality projects.
Exactly. Because we know our physical bodies will die, we try to construct a conceptual self, an identity, a legacy that will outlive our physical self.
We put our names on hospital wings, we write books, we obsess over having children to carry on our name, we build massive corporate empires, we align ourselves with eternal religions or sweeping political movements.
Becker argues that almost all of human civilization, art, religion, politics, architecture, is essentially a collection of immortality projects designed to give us a sense of meaning that transcends our inevitable physical death.
And when our immortality projects are threatened, when our business fails, or our political candidate loses, or our art is mocked, we experience that subconscious death terror all over again. We panic.
But Becker, ironically, while on his own deathbed, Realize that these frantic immortality projects are actually the source of our suffering.
The bitter antidote to all this anxiety is to stop running and actually face the reality of our own death, to stare it in the face and become completely comfortable with it.
Because when we fully accept the inevitability of our death, all the trivial, superficial distractions, the social media likes, the petty arguments, the fear of embarrassment, they all just fall away. They lose their power entirely.
And this is how we connect these daily habits to long-term personal satisfaction. This is the synthesis of everything we've discussed.
Choosing your struggles, saying no to unimportant requests today, refusing superficial highs, and prioritizing internal controllable values. These aren't just productivity hacks to make you a better worker.
They are the fundamental mechanics of building an immortality project that you actually care about. By accepting the reality of death, we free ourselves to choose our values consciously and freely, rather than being blindly driven by the unconscious terror of being forgotten.
That is incredibly powerful. Let's do a quick overarching recap of the journey we've been on today because we have covered a massive amount of psychological ground.
We started by dismantling the toxic positivity algorithm, looking at the feedback loop from Hell and Charles Bukowski's epitaph. Don't try. We learned that accepting our negative experiences is the only way to break the cycle of anxiety.
We met Disappointment Panda, who taught us the biological necessity of pain, that it's a feature meant to inspire change. We learned to contrast solving real problems versus seeking superficial emotional highs.
We peeled back the layers of the self-awareness onion, realizing that true self-worth is about how we handle our negatives, avoiding the delusions of exceptionalism like Jimmy. We looked at Dave Mustaine and Pete Best to see how the internal or external metrics we choose completely define our reality.
We then delved into radical responsibility, learning from William James and Malala Yousafzai that while we aren't always at fault for the tragedies that happen to us, we are eternally responsible for how we respond to them.
We countered our natural instinct for Manson's law of avoidance by deploying the do-something principle, using tiny actions to generate the inspiration and motivation we lack.
We learned the critical, life-saving importance of boundaries, understanding that without the friction of conflict, genuine trust is impossible. We learned that to value something, we must actively reject its alternatives.
And finally, we confronted the paradox of choice and our own mortality, seeing how true commitment and the awareness of death strip away the trivial and focus us completely on what truly matters.
Connect these daily habits to long-term personal satisfaction. It all ties together.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We spent this entire time talking about how our minds actively, constantly deceive us, inventing false memories, prioritizing short-term comfort over hard truths, and getting stuck in recursive loops of anxiety.
If your brain is constantly trying to trick you into feeling right instead of actually being happy, what is one core foundational belief about yourself that you hold today that might actually be the very thing holding you back?
If you were completely wrong about who you think you are, what would you be free to do tomorrow?
It's a profound, destabilizing question. Certainty is the enemy of growth. Embracing uncertainty about your own identity is the very first step to redefining those values and finding a problem worth solving.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. Remember, we are right here in the conversation with you, learning, unlearning, and trying to navigate these psychological muddy waters together. Practice saying no to unimportant requests today. Choose values that make problems worth solving. Keep questioning, keep growing, and we'll see you next time.